Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had overhaul quirk. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not made of things. It is not made of heroes, or villains, or buildings, or dreams. It is made of matter. It is made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. It is made of bonds, covalent, ionic, metallic. And bonds are fragile things. They are temporary agreements between atoms, waiting for permission to break. Izuku Midoriya learned this when he was 4 years old. Most children learn about the world by touching it. They grasp, they pull, they taste. For Izuku, the lesson came with a sound. It wasn't the boom of an explosion or the whoosh of gravity being defied. It was a wet, sickening squelch, followed by the rattle of plastic rain. He had been sitting on the carpet of the living room, the television blaring a rerun of All Might's debut. In his hands was his most prized possession, the limited edition Silver Age All Might action figure. He was vibrating with excitement, his small fingers clenching tight around the plastic hero's torso as the real All Might on the screen laughed in the face of danger. "I am here!" the TV shouted. "I am here!" Izuku echoed, leaping up. His foot caught the edge of the rug. It was a clumsy, childish stumble. He pitched forward, hands snapping out to break his fall. His right hand, still clutching the action figure, slammed into the hardwood floor. He expected pain in his wrist. He expected the clatter of the toy. Instead, the world warped. A pulse of red bioelectricity, like a jagged vein of lightning, arced from his skin. It wasn't hot, but it felt invasive. It felt like 1,000 tiny needles stitching through the air. In the span of a nanosecond, the plastic figure in his grip dissolved. It didn't melt, it simply ceased to hold its shape. The molecular bonds holding the polymers together snapped in unison. The figure burst into a cloud of colorful dust and raw plastic pellets. Simultaneously, the hardwood floor beneath his palms screamed. The wood grains unraveled, the varnish separated, and the floorboards erupted upward into a twisted, gnarled spire of timber that narrowly missed skewering Izuku's own eye. Silence fell over the apartment. The TV continued to cheer, but the room was dead. Izuku sat in the debris, trembling. His hand was buried in a pile of gray dust that used to be All Might's face. "Izuku?" His mother, Inko, stood in the doorway, a basket of laundry in her arms. She dropped it. The basket didn't break, but the sound was loud enough to snap Izuku out of his trance. "Mommy?" Izuku whispered. He looked at his hand. He felt a terrible, itching urge. A compulsion. The dust felt wrong. It was disorderly. It needed to be fixed. Without thinking, he placed his hand on the pile of dust. Zap! The red lightning arced again. The dust swirled, pulling together as if rewinding time. The polymers linked. The paint pigment separated and realigned. In a blink, the All Might figure sat on the floor, perfectly whole. But it was different. The seam on the arm, a manufacturing defect from the factory, was gone. The plastic felt denser. He hadn't just fixed it, he had perfected it. He looked up at his mother, smiling with tears in his eyes. "Mommy! Look! I have a quirk." Inko Midoriya did not smile. She looked at the twisted spike of wood that had erupted from the floor, a jagged spear capable of killing a man, and then at her son's small, soft hands. She pressed her back against the doorframe, her face draining of color. She looked at him not with pride, but with the primal, instinctive fear of a prey animal spotting a predator. That was the day Izuku learned that his touch did not just feel the world. It owned it. 10 years later, Aldera Junior High was a place of noise and hormones, a petri dish of adolescent anxiety. For 14-year-old Izuku Midoriya, it was a minefield. He sat at his desk, head down, his posture rigid. He wore gloves. They were white cotton, medical-grade gloves that he bought in bulk from the pharmacy. He never took them off. Not when he ate, not when he wrote, and certainly not when he used the bathroom. On his desk was a notebook, but it wasn't just hero analysis for the future. It was advanced organic chemistry and structural engineering. To use his quirk, which the registry had coldly named overhaul, he had to understand what he was touching. He had to know the atomic weight, the density, the structural weakness. If he touched something he didn't understand, the results were catastrophic. He could accidentally fuse a person to a wall, or turn a concrete block into a cloud of silica dust that would shred lungs. So he studied. He studied until his eyes burned. He memorized the periodic table before he memorized the multiplication table. He knew the chemical composition of asphalt, human bone, cotton, and steel. He carried the weight of the physical world in his head, because if he forgot, people could die. So, as third-year students, it's time to think about your futures, the teacher announced, slapping a stack of papers onto his podium. But who am I kidding? You're all aiming for the hero course, the class erupted. Quirks flared, extended fingers, floating objects, minor telekinesis. It was a display of individuality and power. Izuku kept his gloved hands clasped tightly together on his desk. Don't touch the wood. Don't touch the metal. Keep the circuit closed. Hey, teach! The voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. Katsuki Bakugo leaned back in his chair, feet on the desk. Don't lump me in with these extras. I'm the only one here with the stuff to go to UA. The rest of you will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. The class grumbled, but no one challenged him. Bakugo was volatile. He was talented. He was a force of nature. Oh, right, the teacher said, glancing at his clipboard. Midoriya is also aiming for UA, isn't he? The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't the mocking silence that usually accompanied the quirkless. It was a silence born of something colder. Heads turned. Eyes shifted to the boy in the back with the white gloves. Ha! Bakugo let out a dry, short sound. It wasn't a laugh. He stood up, small explosions popping in his palms, and walked toward Izuku's desk. Usually, this was the part where the bully slammed his hand on the victim's desk. Bakugo didn't do that. He stopped 3 feet away. He glared at Izuku, his red eyes narrowing, but he kept his distance. You think you can stand in the same ring as me, Deku? Bakugo growled. Izuku looked up. His green eyes were tired, framed by dark circles from late night studying. It's the only school with the facilities I need, Kaken. You know that. Don't call me that, Bakugo snapped, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. The class watched with bated breath. In their childhood, before the quirks, they had been friends. Then came the playground incident. Izuku remembered it vividly. Bakugo had pushed him. Izuku had stumbled back against an oak tree. In his panic, he had touched the bark. The tree had instantly disassembled and reassembled into a cage of sharpened spikes, snapping around Bakugo like the jaws of a wooden beast. One spike had stopped a millimeter from Bakugo's pupil. Since that day, Bakugo hadn't hit him. He screamed, he threatened, he postured, but he never, ever initiated physical contact. You're a monster, Bakugo hissed, low enough that only Izuku could hear. You don't save people, Deku. You take them apart. You think UA wants a freak who has to wear gloves to stop from besting the whole school? I have it under control, Izuku said softly. Do you? Bakugo scoffed. He pointed at the edge of Izuku's desk. Izuku looked down. In his anxiety, his pinky finger had slipped off the fabric of his glove. It was resting on the corner of the desk. Where the skin touched the laminate, the desk was gray and rotting, the material decomposed into a soft, fungus-like pulp. Izuku snatched his hand back, clutching it to his chest. You're a walking disaster, Bakugo said, turning his back. Stay out of my way. Or I'll blast you from a distance where those cursed hands can't reach me. The class resumed its chatter, but the air remained tense. Izuku stared at the rotting corner of his desk. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small roll of tape, and covered the damage. Control, he told himself. It's all about control. School ended with the ringing of a bell that sounded too much like a warning. Izuku packed his bag quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. He navigated the hallways like a ghost, dodging shoulders and outstretched legs. Physical contact was a risk he couldn't afford. He walked the long way home, taking the route under the highway overpass. It was darker, smelling of mildew and stagnant water, but it was empty. He preferred the emptiness. It was safe. As he walked, he pulled out a small notebook. Quirk analysis number 13. He opened it to a page detailing his own power. Quirk, overhaul, type emitter, ability, dismantling and reassembling matter with bare hands. Conditions, must touch the target with bare skin, hands. Drawbacks, high mental load. Requires knowledge of atomic structure for successful reassembly. Overuse leads to migraines and hives. He looked at the sketch he had drawn of himself. In the drawing, he looked heroic. In reality, he felt like a loaded gun with a faulty safety. To save, he muttered to himself, reciting the mantra he used to fall asleep. To fix. To cure. To mend. To break, a darker voice in his head whispered. To unmake. He was so lost in thought he didn't hear the manhole cover slide open behind him. He didn't hear the wet, slithering sound of the sludge rising from the sewers. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A gurgling voice hissed. Izuku spun around, but he was too slow. A massive wave of dark, foul-smelling liquid crashed over him. It wasn't water. It was viscous, slime-like, forcing its way into his mouth and nose. Don't struggle, kid, the villain laughed, his voice vibrating through the fluid surrounding Izuku's head. It'll only hurt for 45 seconds. Then it's all over. I just need your body to hide from him. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Izuku's chest. He couldn't breathe. The sludge was forcing its way down his throat, filling his esophagus. His vision blurred. He clawed at the fluid, but it was like trying to grab smoke. His gloved fingers slipped harmlessly through the villain's body. I'm going to die, Izuku thought. I'm going to die here, and no one will know. No, he couldn't die. He hadn't fixed anything yet. Think, he screamed internally. Analyze. What is he? Fluid body. High viscosity. Smells like sewage and swamp water. It's a colloidal suspension. Solid particles suspended in liquid. Water base. Likely bonded with a mutant secretion to maintain cohesion. If he couldn't grab it, he had to change it. Izuku's lungs burned. His vision began to darken. He reached up with his right hand to his left. He bit down on the tip of his left glove's middle finger, his teeth grazing the fabric, and tore it off. Skin. Bare skin. The villain didn't notice. Stop squirming. You're mine. Izuku thrust his exposed finger into the bulk of the sludge villain's eye. Contact. The world slowed down. Izuku didn't see a villain. He saw a chemical equation. H2O organic waste mutated mucous membranes unknown binding agent. He didn't want to kill the villain. If he simply deconstructed him, the man would turn into a puddle of blood and gore. That wasn't what a hero did. Separate, Izuku commanded his quirk. Isolate the water. Isolate the solid matter. Break the suspension. Overhaul. A massive surge of red lightning illuminated the darkness of the tunnel. It was blinding, accompanied by the sound of a thunderclap that shattered the tunnel lights. The villain screamed, a gurgling, distorted shriek, as his very physiology rebelled against him. Izuku pushed his will into the matter. He seized the water molecules within the villain's body and violently ripped them away from the solids. Whoosh! In a single second, the sludge villain exploded outward. Not in a gory mess, but in a separation of states. Izuku fell to his knees, gasping, coughing up the last remnants of the slime. Around him, the tunnel had been transformed. The villain was no longer a towering monster. He was a pile of dry, gray dust and dehydrated organic matter, heaped on the concrete like a sandcastle. Surrounding the pile was a perfectly circular ring of crystal-clear water, suspended in the air for a fraction of a second before splashing down onto the pavement. The villain was alive. Izuku could hear the pile of dust groaning weakly, but he had been completely incapacitated. Without the moisture to bind his body, he was just a conscious heap of particulate matter. Izuku panted, wiping his mouth with his gloved hand. He looked at his exposed left finger. It was trembling. The concrete beneath his knee had warped into a smooth, concave bowl to catch him, an instinctive reaction of his quirk to cushion his fall. I didn't kill him, Izuku whispered, his voice hoarse. He checked the pile. Heartbeat is stable. Just extremely dehydrated. Clank. 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 Footsteps echoed from the sewer entrance. Have no fear. For I am, All Might, the symbol of peace, burst out of the manhole cover. He was huge, a mountain of muscle and American coloring, his smile ready to reassure the victim. He raised a fist, prepared to create wind pressure to blow the villain away. He froze. There was no villain to fight. There was only a small, green-haired boy on his knees, shivering, one glove missing. And in front of him, a heap of drying gray silt and a puddle of water. All Might's blue eyes scanned the scene. He saw the red spark still fading from the boy's fingertips. He saw the warped concrete, twisted as if it were clay. The smile on All Might's face didn't falter, but the tension in his shoulders spiked. He knew that look. He knew that kind of destruction. It wasn't the clean destruction of power. It was the chaotic restructuring of reality. "Young man," All Might said, his voice booming but cautious. "Are you injured?" Izuku looked up. His eyes widened. It was him. The hero whose figure he had destroyed 10 years ago. The man he worshipped. All Might, Izuku squeaked. He scrambled back, hiding his exposed hand behind his back. He attacked me. I didn't mean to. All Might stepped forward, his eyes locked on the pile of dust that was groaning. "You did this? To the villain?" "I separated him," Izuku blurted out, terrified that All Might would think he was a murderer. "I separated the water from the sludge. He's alive. Just dry. If you add water he'll be fine. I promise." All Might paused. He looked at the villain, then at the boy. The precision required to separate a fluid villain into component parts without killing him was terrifying. It was surgical. "I see," All Might said, his posture relaxing slightly. He pulled a soda bottle from his pocket, quickly chugged the contents, and began scooping the villain dust into the bottle. "A very unique quirk you have there, young man. Very effective. It's called overhaul," Izuku whispered, looking at the ground. "It breaks things, and fixes them, it seems," All Might noted, looking at the concrete bowl Izuku was sitting in. It was perfectly smooth. All Might finished bottling the villain. He capped it tight. "Well, you are safe now. I must get this evildoer to the police. Stay out of trouble, kid." He turned to leave. He had to leave. His time limit was ticking down, and the presence of this boy with the power to unmake the world, was making his scar ache. It was a psychological reaction, surely, but the boy's power reminded him too much of him. Of All for One. The ability to take and give, to alter and destroy. "Wait!" Izuku scrambled up. "Wait, All Might!" All Might crouched, ready to jump. "I really must go. Can I?" Izuku shouted, closing his eyes tight. "Can I be a hero, even if my quirk is like a villain's? Even if all I do is destroy?" All Might stopped. The wind rustled through the tunnel. He looked back at the boy. Izuku Midoriya looked small, frail, and desperate. He was clutching his hand to his chest as if it were a cursed object. All Might had heard this question before. Usually from kids with scary quirks, spikes, poison, shadows. But this was different. This boy had just defeated a villain in seconds with a touch. He held the power of a god in his fingertips, and he looked like he wanted to cut his own hands off. All Might felt a pang of pity, but also a pragmatic wariness. If this boy loses his way, if he breaks, he could be more dangerous than Shigaraki. More dangerous than anyone. Professional heroism, All Might began, his voice dropping an octave, losing some of its stage presence, is about saving lives. It is about making people feel safe. He turned fully to face Izuku. "Your power is frightening, young man. I will not lie to you. Looking at that villain, it sends a chill down my spine." Izuku flinched. His head dropped. The confirmation of his worst fears. "But," All Might continued. Izuku looked up. "You showed restraint," All Might said. "You could have killed him instantly. You didn't. You analyzed. You separated. You spared him." All Might walked back, looming over Izuku. He didn't pat the boy on the head. He didn't offer a handshake. He knew, instinctively, that this boy didn't want to be touched. "A quirk does not make a hero or a villain," All Might said. "It is how you use it. But listen to me well. Power like yours, It requires a heart twice as strong to control it. If you waver, you will crumble the world around you. Izuku nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know. I study. I study so hard so I don't hurt anyone. All Might looked at the notebook sticking out of the boy's bag. He saw the desperation. And in that desperation, he saw a glimmer of the same fire he carried. The need to do good, despite the burden. What is your name, young man? Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. All Might nodded. Young Midoriya. You ask if you can be a hero. All Might struck a pose, pointing a finger at the sky. If you can master those hands of yours, if you can learn to build as well as you break, then yes. You can be a hero, Izuku sobbed. It was an ugly, heaving sound. He fell forward, his forehead touching the pavement. The concrete rippled slightly under his forehead, turning into soft sand to catch his tears. Thank you, he gasped. Thank you? All Might watched him for a moment longer. He didn't offer one for all. Not yet. This boy didn't need more power. He needed guidance. He needed a teacher who understood that creation and destruction were two sides of the same coin. I am going to take this villain to the station, All Might said. But I do a morning run along Dagoba Beach. It's a trash heap right now. A mess. Izuku looked up, wiping his eyes. If you want to prove you can control that power, All Might said, grinning, meet me there tomorrow at 6 a.m. Let's see if you can clean up a beach without turning it into a crater. All Might leaped into the air, a sonic boom echoing in his wake. Izuku knelt in the tunnel, the silence returning. He looked at his left hand, the one that had dismantled a living creature. He flexed his fingers. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a monster. He felt like a project. A work in progress. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a spare glove, and snapped it on. Dagoba Beach, he whispered. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked out of the tunnel. The concrete where he had knelt was no longer gray. It was polished marble, white and pristine, a small patch of perfection in a dirty world. The next morning, Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a graveyard of the modern era. Tires, refrigerators, broken cars, and mountains of plastic drifted upon the sand. It was a monument to apathy. Izuku stood at the top of the stairs, wearing a green tracksuit. He checked his gloves. Tight. Secure. You came. All Might stood by a rusted truck near the water, in his skeletal form, though Izuku didn't know that yet. He was currently puffed up in his muscle form, steam radiating off him to maintain the illusion. All Might. Izuku ran down the stairs, tripping over a loose tire but catching himself. This is your test, young Midoriya, All Might boomed. This beach has been a dump for years. People illegal dump here because it's convenient. Heroes ignore it because it's not glamorous work. All Might swept his arm across the horizon of trash. You want to save people? Start by saving this coastline. But here is the rule. All Might pointed a finger at him. You cannot simply erase the trash. You cannot turn it all into dust and let the wind carry it away. That is pollution. That is lazy. Izuku nodded, pulling out a notepad. Then what should I do? Recycle, All Might said. Sort it. Break it down to its base components. Separate the rubber from the steel, the plastic from the glass. Compact it into cubes for easy transport. Do not destroy. Overhaul. Izuku's eyes lit up. It was a chemistry test. A massive, sprawling chemistry test. Yes, sir. You have 10 months until the UA entrance exam, All Might said. Let's see what you can do. Izuku stepped up to a pile of trash. It was a tangled mess of a refrigerator, a bicycle, and fishing nets. He took a deep breath. He visualized the materials. Steel. Aluminum. Nylon. Freon gas. He placed both hands on the pile. The red lightning danced. It was brighter than yesterday. It crackled with intent. The trash pile shuddered. Then it flowed. The metal liquefied and swirled into the air, separating into silver streams of aluminum and dark veins of iron. The fishing net unraveled, the nylon threads weaving themselves into a tight, neat rope. The refrigerator's coolant was siphoned into a glass bottle that formed out of broken beer shards. In 10 seconds the pile was gone. In its place stood 3 perfect cubes, one of iron, one of aluminum, one of compressed plastic. and a coil of rope on top. All Might watched, his jaw slightly slack. He had expected the boy to struggle. He had expected him to break things, but Izuku wasn't struggling. He was smiling. For Izuku, this wasn't labor. This was clarity. For years, the world had been a chaotic noise of atoms screaming at him. But here, he could impose order. He could make things right. He moved to the next pile. And the next, zap. Shift. Cube. Zap. Shift. Cube. It was rhythmic. It was beautiful. All Might sat on the hood of the truck, watching the sunrise glint off the growing wall of metal cubes. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Mizu? All Might said into the phone. Yes, it's me. I think I found a teacher for next year. Oh? The principal's voice squeaked. For which subject? Foundations of Heroism, All Might said, watching Izuku turn a rusted car into a stack of pristine steel ingots. And maybe someone to keep an eye on the support course. I've found a gemstone, Niza, but it's sharp. Very sharp. 10 months later, the entrance exam. The gates of Yue High School were massive, imposing, and gleaming in the sun. Students swarmed the entrance, buzzing with nerves. Izuku Midoriya stood at the gate. He had changed. He was no longer the scrawny boy who tripped over rugs. His shoulders were broader, filled out by 10 months of moving heavy cubes of metal. His eyes were sharper. He wore a modified tracksuit with reinforced pockets for his gloves. He didn't look arrogant, but he carried himself with a terrifying stillness. Out of my way, Deku. Bakugo walked past him, bumping his shoulder intentionally. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't stumble. He simply shifted his weight, letting Bakugo pass. Good luck, Katsuki, Izuku said calmly. Bakugo stopped. He looked back, his eyes narrowing. The use of his real name, not the childhood nickname, threw him off. He scoffed and kept walking, but his hands were trembling slightly. Izuku took a deep breath. He looked at his hands. Under the gloves, his fingerprints were calloused. He walked into the orientation hall. President Mike yelled about the rules. Robots. Points. Destruction. Destroy the robots to gain points. Izuku frowned. It was a crude test. It favored physical strength and flashy emitters. But he could work with it. When the gates to Battle Center B opened, Izuku didn't run. He walked. The other examinees sprinted past him. What's that guy doing? Is he giving up? A one-pointer robot, a fast-wheeled drone, came careening around the corner, targeting a girl with vines for hair. Target acquired. The robot screeched. Izuku stepped in front of the girl. Hey! Watch out! She screamed. Izuku didn't punch. He didn't kick. He knelt down and slammed his palms onto the asphalt road. Terrain shift. The red lightning surged through the ground, traveling faster than the eye could follow. The asphalt beneath the robot didn't just crack, it flowed. It rose up like a tidal wave of black stone, crested, and crashed down upon the machine. Crunch. The robot was flattened instantly, crushed by the very road it drove on. Izuku stood up. The asphalt wave receded, smoothing itself back out into a flat road, leaving the flattened scrap metal of the robot embedded in the surface like a fossil. The girl stared at him, mouth open. What was that? Pavement composition is mostly aggregate and bitumen, Izuku muttered, adjusting his gloves. Easy to manipulate. He kept walking. A three-pointer appeared. A massive missile-firing hulk. Izuku didn't slow down. He touched the brick wall of the building next to him. The bricks flew out, swirling around him like a shield, then shot forward like bullets. They shredded the robot's sensors and joints. The machine collapsed. Izuku walked through the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra. He didn't fight the robots. He simply rearranged the environment so that the robots could no longer exist within it. 40 points. 50 points. 60 points. He was efficient. He was terrifying. And then, the ground shook. The zero-pointer. It was a titan. A machine the size of a skyscraper, looming over the city block. Its massive treads crushed buildings. Debris rained down. The examinees screamed and ran. Run! It's unbeatable. Izuku turned to run with them. There was no point in fighting it. It was worth 0 points. Ouch! A voice cried out from the dust. Izuku stopped. He looked back. Uraraka Ochako was trapped. A piece of rubble had pinned her leg. The zero-pointer was looming over her, its massive metal foot descending. Izuku's body moved on its own. He sprinted toward her. I can't lift that rubble. Not in time. He slid to a halt next to her. Run! She screamed. Don't move, Izuku commanded. His voice was steady. He touched the rubble pinning her leg. Zap! The rock turned into sand. She was free, but the shadow was falling. The giant foot was descending. Izuku looked up. He couldn't destroy the robot with the ground. It was too big. The asphalt would crumble before the metal did. He had to touch it. Izuku jumped. He used a pillar of concrete to launch himself into the air, soaring toward the descending mechanical leg. He ripped the glove off his right hand. He needed full contact. Maximum output. He slammed his hand onto the shin of the zero-pointer. Mass disassembly? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a spiderweb of red light cracked across the entire surface of the robot. It glowed brighter than the sun. Izuku screamed as the feedback hit his brain. The sheer complexity of the machine, the hydraulics, the electronics, the armor plates, it was a hurricane of information. Break it. Break the bonds. Break it all. Snap. The sound was deafening. It wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of structural integrity failing on a godlike scale. The zero-pointer didn't fall over. It fell apart. Bolts popped. Welds vanished. The molecular lattice of the steel gave way. In a cascade of noise, the giant robot dissolved into a rain of scrap metal. The head detached from the neck, the arms fell from the sockets, and the torso collapsed into a heap of plates and wires. Izuku fell through the cloud of debris. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The robot parts crashed around him, burying him in a mountain of metal. Silence returned to the battle center. The other students stopped running. They turned back, staring at the mountain of scrap where a god had just stood. Uraraka stood up, her leg trembling. He took it apart. In the observation room, the pro-heroes were silent. Good Lord, Midnight whispered. That's not a hero ability. That's a natural disaster. He saved the girl, All Might said, his voice quiet but filled with pride. He didn't use his power to destroy the enemy. He used it to remove the threat. Aizawa Shota, clutching his capture scarf, narrowed his eyes at the screen. He has potential. But that power, if he snaps, he takes the city with him. On the screen, a single hand punched its way out of the scrap pile. It was bruised, bleeding, and shaking. Izuku dragged himself out of the wreckage of the zero-pointer. He coughed, dust flying from his lungs. He looked at his bare hand. He quickly reached into his pocket, pulled out a fresh glove, and snapped it on. Safe, he whispered. He collapsed back onto the metal, staring up at the blue sky. The world was made of matter. And for the first time, Izuku Midoriya believed he was strong enough to hold it together. The universe is a math problem. It is a chaotic equation of mass, energy, and the forces that bind them. For most people, the equation is invisible. They walk through walls of air, step on floors of concrete, and drink water without ever considering the miraculous tension holding those molecules together. For Izuku Midoriya, the equation was screaming. 6 months before the entrance exam, Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was no longer just a garbage dump, it was a laboratory. The sun beat down on the coastline, reflecting off the jagged peaks of scrap metal that Izuku had organized into neat, towering ziggurats. Izuku sat cross-legged on top of a crushed minivan, a college-level textbook titled Advanced Inorganic Structural Lattice Integrity balanced on his knees. He wasn't wearing his school uniform. He wore a heavy rubber apron over a tank top, his arms glistening with sweat, and his signature white cotton gloves replaced by heavy-duty industrial ones. Young Midoriya, All Might's voice boomed across the sand, displacing a flock of seagulls. The symbol of peace stood near the seawall, holding a bento box that looked comically small in his massive hand. You've been staring at that microwave for 20 minutes. All Might shouted, leaping over a pile of tires to land beside his student. Physical conditioning is important, but you can't overhaul the world with your eyes. Izuku didn't look up. His green eyes were darting back and forth across the page, his muttering a low, frantic buzz. It's not the microwave, All Might. It's the shielding. The magnetron uses a copper anode block, but the casing is a cheap alloy. If I disassemble it too fast, the beryllium and the ceramic insulators could aerosolize. I need to know the melting point of the solder relative to the tensile strength of the casing to separate them cleanly. All Might blinked. He stood there, the greatest hero in the world, a man who solved problems by punching them until the weather changed, and felt completely out of his depth. Ah, All Might said, nodding sagely. The beryllium. Yes. Very dangerous. Izuku snapped the book shut and looked up. The fear that used to haunt his eyes was slowly being replaced by a frantic, intellectual intensity. You said I have to master this, All Might? If I use my quirk on a person and I don't know the difference between a calcium ion and a potassium ion, I could stop their heart instead of restarting it. I could turn their bones to glass. He held up his gloved hands. They were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the constant, low-level neurological strain of his quirk reaching out for contact. I'm not just training muscles, Izuku whispered. I'm training my brain to process 1 billion variables in a microsecond. If I slip up, people die. All Might's smile softened. He sat down on the minivan, the suspension groaning under his weight. You carry a heavy burden for a 14-year-old. When I received One for All, my body had to be ready. But your mind has to be a fortress. I don't have a choice, Izuku said, looking at the ocean. Kaken. Bakugo, his power is explosion. It's simple. It destroys. But my power, it's not destruction. It's change, and change requires direction. All Might placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Then let us test that direction. See that engine block over there? Izuku looked at the rusted V8 engine sitting in the sand, half buried in kelp. I want you to turn it into a set of dumbbells, All Might said. But here is the catch. You must keep the carbon content of the steel consistent. Do not weaken the metal. Reshape it, but maintain the temper. Izuku took a deep breath. He hopped off the van. He approached the engine. He closed his eyes, visualizing the lattice. Iron atoms arranged in a body-centered cubic crystal structure. Carbon atoms in the interstices. He took off his right glove. The sea breeze felt cool against his bare skin. He touched the cold, rusted metal. Overhaul. The sensation was immediate. It wasn't like hearing a sound. It was like becoming the metal. He felt the rust, iron oxide clinging to the surface like a disease. He felt the oil sludge in the pistons. He felt the microscopic cracks in the manifold. Purge the oxide. Separate the oil. Compress the iron. Red lightning crackled, aggressive and loud. The engine didn't melt. It shattered into a cloud of suspended particles, a swarm of angry metal bees buzzing in a magnetic field generated by Izuku's bioelectricity. Izuku gritted his teeth, a vein bulging in his forehead. The headache was instant, a spike of agony behind his eyes. Hold it. Shape it. He forced his will upon the cloud. The particles swirled, condensed, and slammed back together with a deafening clang. Where the rusted engine had been, 2 perfectly symmetrical, polished steel dumbbells sat in the sand. They shone like mirrors. Izuku fell to his knees, dry heaving. The mental feedback was nauseating. Excellent. All Might cheered, picking up one of the dumbbells. It weighed easily 50 kilograms. Perfect balance. No rust. You're getting faster, my boy. Izuku wiped his mouth, reaching for his water bottle. I lost 0.4% of the mass to oxidation during the transfer, he wheezed. It's not perfect. You are a perfectionist, All Might laughed. That is good. You will need to be. Because UA isn't just about power. It's about precision. 2 months before the exam, the classroom, the atmosphere at Aldera Junior High had shifted. It was a subtle change, like the drop in barometric pressure before a storm. For years, the ecosystem had been simple. Bakugo was the apex predator, and Midoriya was the prey. But the prey had stopped running. Izuku sat at his desk, writing in a new notebook, Quirk Synergy and Environmental Modification Volume 14. He was sketching a diagram of how to use overhaul to manipulate air pressure by rapidly expanding and contracting the nitrogen in the atmosphere. Deku. The kick to his desk was violent. Izuku's pen didn't slip. He finished the curve of the diagram before looking up. Katsuki Bakugo stood over him, hands smoking, eyes wild. I heard you're still applying to UA. I thought I told you to quit while you were ahead. The class went silent. Usually Izuku would flinch. He would stutter. He would apologize. Izuku slowly closed the notebook. He adjusted his white gloves, smoothing out the wrinkles. I'm applying, Katsuki, Izuku said. His voice was calm, almost clinical. My mock exam scores are in the top 0.2% of the prefecture. It would be illogical not to apply to the best school. Bakugo's eye twitched. Illogical? You think you're some kind of genius now just because you learned a few parlor tricks? You're still a pebble. You're still beneath me. Bakugo lunged, his right hand crackling with an explosion aimed at Izuku's face. It was a telegraph move. Sloppy. Emotional. Izuku didn't dodge. He raised his left hand, palm open, fingers splayed. He didn't touch Bakugo. He touched the air between them. Atmospheric density, solidify. It was a high-level application he had been practicing. By ionizing the air molecules and forcing a temporary, rigid bond between the nitrogen and oxygen, he created a wall. It wasn't permanent, it would dissipate in a second, but for that second, the air was as hard as concrete. Boom! Bakugo's explosion detonated against the invisible barrier 6 inches from Izuku's palm. The force blew back into Bakugo's face, knocking the blond boy backward into the chalkboard. Smoke cleared. Izuku hadn't moved. The barrier dissolved back into gas. You need to be careful with nitroglycerin sweating from your palms, Izuku said, his tone devoid of mockery, sounding only like a concerned doctor. If you ignite it that close to a solid surface, the concussive force can cause microfractures in your metacarpals. You should check your wrist for hairline fractures. Bakugo sat on the floor stunned. The class stared, mouths agape. Izuku stood up, picked up his bag, and walked toward the door. As he passed Bakugo, he stopped. I'm not looking down on you, Katsuki, Izuku said softly. I'm just looking at the facts. You destroy things. I fix them. We aren't in the same lane anymore. He walked out. Bakugo stared at the door, his hands shaking. For the first time, he didn't feel anger. He felt a cold, creeping dread. The nerd hadn't fought back. He had neutralized him. The day of the exam, the written test, UA High School was a fortress of glass and steel. Thousands of students flooded the gates, but Izuku moved through them like a ghost. He was hyper-aware of everything: the composition of the paved walkway, high-grade polymer concrete, the glass of the windows, tempered, reinforced with transparent aluminum, the very air quality. He sat in the lecture hall for the written exam. It was easy. Question 4. Describe the structural weaknesses of a villain with a gigantification quirk composed of silicate rock. Izuku wrote for 10 minutes straight. He didn't just describe the weaknesses. He wrote a dissertation on the cleavage planes of silicate minerals, the effects of rapid thermal expansion on rock-based biology, and the precise amount of force, in newtons, required to shatter the patella of a 20-meter rock golem. He finished the exam 20 minutes early. He sat in silence, meditating, visualizing the periodic table, keeping his mind organized. The headache was always there, a low hum in the back of his skull, the price of a quirk that constantly wanted to disassemble reality. The practical exam, Battle Center B. The gates opened. The crowd surged. Izuku walked. As Izuku entered the mock city, he scanned the environment. Buildings fake. Steel girders, concrete facades. Hollow interiors. Roads, asphalt, 10 centimeters thick, gravel base. Pipes, running water, pressurized. Target acquired. A two-pointer, a mechanical scorpion-like robot, lunged at him from an alleyway. Izuku didn't panic. He analyzed. Joints, exposed hydraulics. Material, titanium alloy. He could touch the robot and destroy it, but that required getting close to the pincers. Too risky. Izuku dropped to one knee and touched the water main cover on the street. Hydropressurize. He overhauled the iron cover, dissolving it instantly, and then touched the water beneath. He didn't create water. He manipulated the pressure of the existing flow. A jet of water, pressurized to 40,000 psi, enough to cut steel, erupted from the ground. It sliced through the two-pointer's undercarriage like a laser. The robot fell in two clean halves, sparking and dead. 6 points, Izuku muttered, standing up and wiping water from his cheek. He moved on. He saw other students fighting. He saw Ida Tenya using his engines to kick a robot. He saw Uraraka floating debris. They were flashy. They were heroes. Izuku felt like a janitor. A janitor of violence. He rounded a corner and found three three-pointers cornering a student with a tail, Ojiro. The student was holding his own, but he was overwhelmed. Izuku didn't yell a battle cry. He slapped his hands onto the brick wall of the adjacent building. Matter extension, spikes. The brick wall didn't crumble. It grew. Like a fast-forward video of a coral reef, spikes of red brick erupted from the wall, skewering the three robots horizontally. They were pinned to the wall, impaled, their engines whining as they died. Ojiro stared at the wall, then at Izuku. Dude, thanks. Don't touch the spikes, Izuku warned, walking past. The structural integrity is compromised. They'll turn to dust in about 2 minutes. He continued his patrol. 45 points. 52 points. 60 points. He was in the lead. Or close to it. He stopped in the center of the main street. He was panting. His head throbbed. Overusing the quirk caused a fever-like sensation. His skin felt hot. Just a little more, he whispered. Show them. Show all might. Then, the ground shook. The 0-pointer rose. The chaos that followed was a blur. The screaming. The running. When Izuku saw Uraraka trapped, the calculation stopped. The cold, scientific part of his brain, the part that analyzed alloys and density, went silent. Only one variable remained: save her. He ran. He slid. He vaporized the rock on her leg. And then, he jumped. The memory of the jump was hazy. He remembered the wind in his ears. He remembered the terrifying size of the robot's face. He remembered taking off his glove. The contact with the 0-pointer was the most overwhelming sensation of his life. It wasn't just metal. It was millions of parts. It was electricity, grease, glass, rubber, copper, gold, silicon. It was a city condensed into a giant. To destroy it, he had to understand it. In that split second of contact, Izuku's mind was forced to process the blueprint of the entire machine. It was like downloading a terabyte of data into a floppy disk. Pain. White-hot agony in his frontal lobe. Disassemble. He didn't just break it. He rejected its existence. The explosion of parts was beautiful in a terrifying way. It was a firework display of engineering failure. When Izuku fell, he didn't feel the impact. He was already gone, his mind shutting down to protect itself from the overload. The aftermath, the infirmary, the smell of antiseptic woke him up. Izuku blinked. The ceiling was white. A familiar, sterile white. He tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea slammed him back into the pillow. He groaned, clutching his head. It felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through his temples. Easy, Sonny. You scrambled your brain pretty good. Izuku turned his head. Sitting on a high stool was a small, elderly woman with a syringe-shaped cane. Recovery girl. Recovery girl, Izuku croaked. His throat was dry. You're lucky, she said, hopping down. She walked over and checked his vitals monitor. Physical trauma, moderate. Several bruises, a sprained wrist from the recoil. But the neurological stress. Your brain skin lit up like a Christmas tree. She looked at him, her expression serious. I've seen quirks like yours before, she said. Transformation types. Emitter types that affect matter. But yours, it's invasive. You don't just manipulate things, you rewrite them. Izuku looked at his hands. They were bandaged. Even in his sleep, someone had put gloves back on him. He felt a pang of gratitude. Did I pass? Izuku asked. That's not for me to say, she huffed. But you certainly made a mess. The cleanup crew is going to be working for a week to sort out the scrap metal you created. Though Cementos mentioned the piles were surprisingly organized. The door slid open. I am here. Entering like a normal person, All Might squeezed through the door. Wearing a yellow suit that looked 3 sizes too big for his skeletal form, he had deflated. He coughed, blood spattering on his handkerchief. All Might! Izuku tried to rise again. Stay down, young Midoriya, All Might said, closing the door and locking it. He pulled up a chair. Recovery Girl knows about my situation. And she knows you are my pupil, Recovery Girl sighed. A reckless teacher and a reckless student. A match made in heaven. All Might looked at Izuku. The hero's face was serious. Midoriya. That attack on the 0-pointer. You disassembled a machine weighing 400 tons in 0.03 seconds. Izuku flinched. I had to. Uraraka was. I know, All Might said gently. You saved her. That is what heroes do. But we need to talk about the cost. All Might pointed to Izuku's arms. Under the hospital gown, faint red lines traced up his veins, like Lichtenberg figures, scars from lightning strikes. Your quirk is bioelectric in nature, All Might explained. When you overhaul matter, you conduct that energy. Usually it's fine. But with something that big, you nearly fried your own nervous system. If you had held on for a second longer, you might have lobotomized yourself. Izuku went pale. You need a limiter, Recovery Girl said. You can't go around deconstructing skyscrapers. Your body can't handle the feedback loop. I can control it, Izuku said, his voice trembling. I panicked. I need to be better. You will be, All Might said. He reached into his pocket. But for now, rest. You did good, kid. You did good. 1 week later, the Midoriya apartment. The waiting was the hardest part. Harder than the beach cleanup. Harder than the exam. Izuku sat at the dinner table, staring at a fish on his plate. He had instinctively deboned it with a tap of his chopstick, separating the meat from the skeleton perfectly. Izuku, honey, please eat, Inko said, looking worried. She had been pacing for days. I can't, Mom. The doorbell rang. They both froze. Inko ran to the door. She came back holding a white envelope with the Yue wax seal. It's here, she whispered. Izuku took the envelope. His hands were shaking so bad he almost activated his quirk on the paper. He ran to his room, slamming the door. He sat at his desk, the desk he had once rotted by accident, now repaired with tape. He tore the envelope open. A metal disc fell out. Click. Whir. A hologram projected onto the wall. I am here. All Might's face filled the room. Izuku gasped. All Might? Young Midoriya. The hologram boomed. You are looking at the newest faculty member of Yue High. That is right. I will be teaching you. Izuku covered his mouth to stifle a sob. Now to the results. All Might picked up a scorecard. Written exam, 98%. Outstanding. You have the mind of a scholar. Practical exam, villain points. 60. Izuku exhaled. 60 points. That was good. That was enough. However, All Might raised a finger. A hero is not judged solely by the villains he defeats. A hero is judged by the lives he saves. The video cut to a clip. It was Uraraka, standing in the negotiation room at UA. Please, she was saying to present Mike. That boy, the one with the curly hair and the gloves. He saved me. He gave up his points to smash that giant robot. Can I give him my points? Izuku's eyes widened. Tears began to flow freely. Rescue points. All Might shouted, the video returning to him. For your act of selfless sacrifice, risking your own safety and your exam score to save another. Yui awards you 60 rescue points. The scoreboard flashed. Villain points 60, rescue points 60, total 120. First place. All Might shouted. Izuku Midoriya. You have passed with flying colors. Come, young man. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the dark room, the silence heavy. He looked at his hands. For years he had seen them as tools of ruin. He had seen himself as a defect, a breaker of things. But Uraraka had seen a savior. All Might saw a hero. He clenched his fists. I'll do it, he whispered to the empty room. I'll rewrite this world. I'll take it apart and build a better one. April, the first day. The halls of UA were massive. The doors were huge, built to accommodate quirks of all sizes. Izuku stood in front of Class 1A. He adjusted his tie. He checked his gloves. He had new ones now, specially made by a support company All Might had recommended. They were made of a conductive fiber that helped regulate his bioelectricity. He took a deep breath and slid the door open. Get your feet off the desk. Ha! You can't tell me what to do, Four Eyes. The noise hit him instantly. Ida Tenya was scolding Bakugo. Bakugo was sneering. Izuku stepped in. The room went quiet. Bakugo looked up. His eyes narrowed. Deku, he growled. Good morning, Katsuki, Izuku said pleasantly. He walked to his seat behind Bakugo. Oh. It's you! Uraraka appeared at the door, beaming. The boy who smashed the robot. You got in. I knew you would. Izuku felt his face heat up. Oh, yes. You're Uraraka-san, right? Thank you for speaking up for me. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. A yellow sleeping bag lay on the floor near the podium. A zipper opened, revealing a tired, unshaven man with bloodshot eyes. Aizawa Shota stood up, shedding the sleeping bag like a cocoon. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota, he deadpanned. He pulled a gym uniform out of his bag. Put these on and meet me on the field. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. A test? Uraraka gasped. But what about the entrance ceremony? The orientation? Aizawa looked at her with cold, dark eyes. If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for leisurely events. Yuri runs on a freelance system. I can cut anyone I deem without potential. He looked directly at Izuku. Last place gets expelled. Izuku swallowed hard. He felt the familiar thrum of anxiety. He looked at his classmates. Bakugo, the explosion. Todoroki, the ice and fire, quietly sitting in the back. Ida, the engine. They were all powerhouses. But Izuku had something they didn't. He understood the building blocks of their power better than they did. He grabbed his gym uniform. Analysis complete, he thought. Let's begin the experiment. The locker room smelled of cheap deodorant and teenage anxiety. It was a scent Izuku Midoriya had grown accustomed to over the years, usually accompanied by the metallic tang of blood from a fresh nosebleed, or the smell of burnt sugar from a nearby explosion. But today, the air was different. It was heavy with curiosity. Izuku stood in the corner, facing his open locker. He removed his blazer, folding it with meticulous, almost robotic precision. He unbuttoned his white shirt, revealing a torso that was leaner and more scarred than a 14-year-old's should be. Whoa, dude. The voice was rough, friendly, and close. Izuku flinched, instinctively pulling his gym uniform shirt over his head to cover his chest. He turned to see a boy with spiky red hair and a grin that seemed to show too many teeth. Those represent some serious training, the redhead said, pointing a thumb at his own chest. I'm Kirishima Eijiro. Nice to meet you, Izuku blinked, adjusting the collar of his blue UA tracksuit. Midoriya. Izuku. So, Midoriya, Kirishima continued, leaning against the lockers. Everyone's talking about the entrance exam. Rumor is you turned the zero-pointer into confetti. What's your quirk? Super strength? Telekinesis? The chatter in the room died down. Everyone was listening. Even Bakugo, who was aggressively shoving his legs into his pants across the room, paused for a fraction of a second. Izuku looked down at his hands. He was currently wearing his civilian gloves, thin, breathable cotton. He reached into his locker and pulled out his active gloves. These were different. Made of a Kevlar weave polymer with conductive silver threading, they were designed to withstand the stress of rapid molecular alteration. He pulled them on, the fabric snapping tight against his skin. It's called overhaul, Izuku said quietly. Overhaul? Kirishima tilted his head. Like fixing cars? Like rearranging matter, Izuku corrected. He flexed his fingers. I take things apart. Sometimes I put them back together. A small boy with grape-like balls on his head, Mineta, shivered. Takes things apart? Like people? Izuku looked at him. His green eyes were flat, analytical. For a second, he saw the boy not as a classmate, but as a collection of lipids, proteins, and calcium phosphate. Height, 108 centimeters. Estimated bone density, low. If I have to, Izuku said. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of awe. It was the silence of a prey animal freezing in tall grass. Izuku closed his locker. He didn't mean to scare them. He was just stating a fact. To him, biology was just wet chemistry. And chemistry could always be altered. "Let's go," he whispered to himself, walking past the frozen group. "Don't touch anyone. Don't break anyone." The playgrounds were vast, a testament to UA's absurd budget. The sky was a piercing blue, innocent and clear, contrasting sharply with the man standing at the center of the field. Aizawa Shoda looked like a man who hadn't slept since the pre-quirk era. He stood with a slouch, his hands buried in his pockets, his capture weapon wrapped loosely around his neck like a scarf made of bandages. "Bakugo," Aizawa said, his voice dry and rasping. "How far could you throw a softball in middle school?" Bakugo stepped forward, scowling. 67 meters. "Try it with your quirk," Aizawa said, tossing him a ball. "Anything goes. Just stay in the circle." Bakugo grinned. It was a feral expression. He stepped into the circle, stretched his arm, and wound up. Dai! Boom! A massive explosion propelled the ball into the stratosphere. Smoke curled from Bakugo's palm. He looked back at the class, his red eyes seeking out Izuku. "Top that, alchemist." Aizawa checked his device. 705.2 meters. The class erupted. "Awesome! This is going to be fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want." Aizawa's expression darkened. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Fun?" he repeated softly. "You have 3 years to become heroes. You think the villains are going to let you have fun? You think natural disasters wait for you to enjoy yourselves?" He pushed his hair back, revealing a scar under his eye. "Right. Let's make this interesting. The student who ranks last in total points after all 8 events will be judged to have no potential." He looked directly at Izuku, "and will be instantly expelled." The class gasped. "Expelled?" On the first day, Uraraka Ochako stepped forward, her hands clenched. "That's not fair. We just got here." "Natural disasters aren't fair," Aizawa countered. "Power outages, building collapses, mass murders. Heroes are the ones who correct the unfairness. If you wanted to hang out with your friends at a burger joint, you should have gone to a normal high school." He pointed to the field. "Welcome to the hero course." Izuku felt a cold sweat prickle on his neck. Expulsion. He looked at his hands. He wasn't like the others. He couldn't just use his quirk. His quirk was a scalpel. If he used it bluntly, he killed people. If he used it too much, he hurt himself. Calculate, he told himself. Optimize. Survive. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida Tenya was a machine. Literally. His engines roared, and he crossed the line in 3.04 seconds. Next group. Midoriya. Ajiri. Izuku stepped up to the line. Next to him was a girl with a frog-like posture. She looked relaxed. Izuku looked at the track. Synthetic rubber surface. High friction coefficient. Standard polyurethane. If he ran normally, he'd clock in at around 7 seconds. Average. That wouldn't save him from expulsion. Ready. Izuku knelt down. He placed his fingertips on the track. Start. Ajiri leaped, her powerful legs propelling her forward. Izuku didn't run immediately. He pulsed his quirk. Terrain ripple. Red sparks flew. The track beneath his feet didn't break, it warped. A wave of rubber and earth rose up behind him, acting like a starting block but with active propulsion. Izuku pushed off, and simultaneously, he slammed his hands down again in front of him. He wasn't running on the track. He was pulling the track toward him. He disassembled the ground in front of his toes and reassembled it behind his heels in a rapid, flowing motion. It looked like he was surfing on a treadmill of dissolving earth. It was disorienting. It was nauseating to watch. The ground rippled like a snake's belly. He crossed the line. 5.51 seconds, the robot announced. Izuku stumbled to a halt, the track smoothing out behind him as if nothing had happened. He panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. It was faster than running, but the mental load of constantly restructuring the ground while moving was immense. Ajiri looked at him, blinking her large eyes. That was unsettling, Karo. Sorry, Izuku muttered. It's the most efficient way to travel. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the hand grip device. It was a digital dynamometer. He squeezed. 56 kilograms. Average for a fit teenager. He looked at Shoji, the multi-armed student, who just scored 540 kilograms. I need more. Izuku looked at the machine. Plastic casing. Steel spring. Pressure sensor. He didn't squeeze. He activated overhaul on the spring itself. Molecular fusion. He fused the coils of the spring together into a solid cylinder of steel. The resistance became infinite. He squeezed again. The machine couldn't compress the spring, so it registered the force he was applying against an immovable object. The screen flickered. Error. I think I broke it, Izuku said, handing it back to the robot. Aizawa watched him from the sidelines. He noted it on his clipboard. Resourceful. But destructive. He solves problems by removing the parameters of the problem. Test 3. Standing long jump. Bakugo blasted himself across the sandbox. Aoyama used his naval laser. Izuku stood at the edge of the pit. He took a deep breath. He touched the ground. Pillar extension. A column of compressed earth shot up under his feet, launching him into the air like a catapult. As he arced over the sand, he touched the air, specifically, the dust particles suspended in it. He couldn't fly, but he could create stepping stones. He solidified a cloud of dust into a thin, fragile plate of silica for a fraction of a second, just enough to push off of with his foot. Step. Step. Land. He cleared the sandbox entirely. The class was starting to look at him differently. At the entrance exam, he had been a brute force monster. Here, he was something else. He was a wizard of matter. He didn't obey the laws of physics. He rewrote them on the fly. He's versatile, Jayoro Zumomo whispered to Todoroki. He understands material science at a level that, frankly, scares me. Todoroki didn't answer. He just watched Izuku's hands. Test 5, the ball throw. This was it. The main event. Izuku watched Uraraka throw the ball. She touched it, and it floated away. Infinity, the machine read. The class cheered. Izuku felt a knot in his stomach. How could he beat infinity? Midoriya, Aizawa called. Izuku walked to the circle. He picked up the softball. It was standard leather and cork. He stood in the circle. He could feel Aizawa's eyes boring into his back. Analysis. If I throw it normally, 40 meters. If I use the pillar launch, maybe 80. No. I need to go further. He looked at his arm. He remembered the 0-pointer. The pain. I can't break my arm. But I can break the air. Izuku wound up. He activated one for all. No, he didn't have that. He activated overhaul. He prepared to disassemble the air in front of the ball to create a vacuum, eliminating air resistance, while simultaneously creating a repulsive blast wave of matter from his palm. His quirk flared. The red lightning danced up his arm. The ground beneath him began to crack, ready to provide the raw material for the blast. Smash! He whispered. Suddenly, the lightning vanished. The connection to the matter was cut. The chemical equations in his head turned into gibberish. The world stopped being a list of ingredients, and just became heavy. Izuku stumbled forward, the throw weak and powerless. The ball rolled a pathetic 46 meters. What? Izuku gasped. He looked at his hands. My quirk. He turned around. Aizawa was staring at him. His hair was floating, defying gravity. His eyes glowed a piercing red. The capture scarf floated around him like a nest of vipers. I erased it, Aizawa said flatly. The class gasped. Erased? Aizawa walked forward, his footsteps silent. That entrance exam. It wasn't rational. A quirk that destroys everything it touches, and a user who seems terrified of his own hands. Aizawa stopped inches from Izuku's face. He smelled of dry eye drops and coffee. From what I saw, you have no control. You either do nothing, or you cause a catastrophe. You're like a toddler with a loaded shotgun. I can control it, Izuku stammered. I've been practicing. I studied the molecular structure of... It doesn't matter what you studied, Aizawa cut him off. In a crisis, panic overrides intellect. If you lose focus for 1 second while holding a victim, what happens? Do you disassemble them? Do you turn a hostage into a pile of gore because you got startled? The words hit Izuku like physical blows. It was his nightmare. The nightmare he woke up from screaming, Bakugo's arm turning to dust. his mother turning to stone. You can't save people if you're busy trying not to kill them, Aizawa hissed. Izuku Midoriya. Your power is not a gift. It is a threat. If you cannot prove to me right now that you can use it without risking everyone in a 5-mile radius, I will expel you. I will revoke your quirk registry. You will never be a hero. Aizawa blinked. His hair fell. The red glow faded. You have one more throw. Don't disappoint me. Aizawa walked back to the line. Izuku stood alone in the circle. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He's right. I am a threat. He looked at the ball. But I'm also the only one who can fix it. He closed his eyes. He thought about the beach. He thought about the engine block he turned into dumbbells. Don't destroy. Modify. Don't break the world. Shape it. He opened his eyes. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. He didn't wind up for a throw this time. He dropped into a crouch. He placed the ball on the ground. He placed his left hand on the dirt behind the ball, and his right hand on the ball itself. Construct. Railgun assembly. It happened in a heartbeat. The ground beneath him groaned. The dirt and asphalt disassembled, swirling into a frenzy of particulate matter. But it didn't stay as dust. Under Izuku's guidance, the minerals in the soil, silica, iron, carbon, separated and fused instantly. A structure rose from the earth. It was a long, narrow barrel made of crystallized stone and reinforced with iron extracted from the soil. It was ugly, jagged, and crude, but the internal rifling was mathematically perfect. The barrel pointed up at a 45-degree angle. The ball sat at the base. Izuku kept his hand on the breech of his stone cannon. Pressure. I need pressure. He slammed his hand onto the ground behind the cannon. He seized a pocket of air and compressed it. He compressed it until the nitrogen atoms were screaming, forcing them into a chamber at the base of the barrel. 3, 2, 1. Overhaul. Release. Izuku broke the seal. Crack. It sounded like a gunshot. A cloud of dust erupted from the circle. The ball didn't fly. It vanished. It shot out of the stone barrel with such velocity that it broke the sound barrier instantly. A white cone of vapor formed around it as it tore a hole through the sky. The stone cannon crumbled into dust immediately after firing. Its purpose served. Izuku stood up amidst the cloud of dust. His nose was bleeding. His head throbbed with a sharp, stabbing migraine. The feedback from creating a pressurized firing mechanism in 3 seconds was immense. He wiped the blood from his nose with his glove. He turned to Aizawa. Aizawa looked at his phone. 709.6 meters. It was further than Bakugo. Izuku clutched his trembling right hand. I didn't destroy the ball, sensei. I just gave it a push. The class was silent. Completely, utterly silent. Then, a roar broke the quiet. DKU! Bakugo launched himself from the crowd. Explosions crackled in his palms. His face was twisted in a rictus of pure, unadulterated rage. What the hell was that? Since when can you make cannons? You lied to me. You've been looking down on me this whole time. He was fast. Lethal. Izuku's eyes widened. Instinct took over. Threat detected. Biological target. Composition, nitrogen, sweat, keratin, muscle. Izuku raised his hand. He didn't want to hurt him. But the calculation began automatically. Disassemble right arm to neutralize threat. Don't! Izuku screamed, more at himself than Bakugo. Suddenly, white cloth wrapped around Bakugo, jerking him to a halt. Aizawa stood there, holding the capture scarf taut. We're wasting time. Let me go! Bakugo thrashed. I'll kill him. No, you won't, Aizawa said, his voice bored but dangerous. And Midoriya. Aizawa looked at Izuku. He saw the boy's hand raised. He saw the fingers twitching, ready to grab Bakugo's face. He saw the terror in Izuku's own eyes as he realized what he had almost done. Stand down, Aizawa finished. Izuku lowered his hand, grabbing his wrist to stop the shaking. Yes, sir. Aizawa released Bakugo. Whatever grudges you have, leave them off the field. Next test. The aftermath. The rest of the tests passed in a blur. Izuku performed well, using his quirk to enhance his sit-ups, creating a stone brace, and his toe touches, temporarily softening his own joints, a painful but effective Trick. When the sun began to set, the class gathered around the scoreboard. Aizawa projected the results. 1. Yairo Zumomo. 2. Todoroki Shoto. 3. Bakugo Katsuki. 4. Ida Tenya. 5. Midoriya Izuku. 20. Mineta Minoru. Izuku let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a year. 5th place. He was safe. By the way, Aizawa said, turning off the hologram. The expulsion thing was a rational deception. Ha! The class shouted. It was a ruse to draw out your maximum potential, Aizawa lied. Or was it a lie? With Aizawa, it was hard to tell. He looked at Izuku as he said it, and Izuku had a feeling that for him, the threat had been very real. So scary. Yairo's sighed, clutching her chest. I should have known. The class began to disperse, chatting excitedly. Midoriya! Uraraka ran up to him. That was amazing! That cannon thing? Whoosh! You were like a sci-fi movie, Ida chopped his hand. Indeed! Your adaptability is impressive, though creating firearms on school grounds is a violation of safety protocols. Izuku smiled weakly. Thanks, guys. I have a headache. I'm going to head to the nurse. He walked away, his steps heavy. Midoriya. Izuku froze. Aizawa was waiting for him by the corner of the building. Sensei. Aizawa leaned against the wall. He looked at Izuku, really looked at him. You hesitated, Aizawa said. Sir, when Bakugo charged you. You hesitated to defend yourself. I didn't want to hurt him. No, Aizawa corrected. You hesitated because you knew if you touched him, you wouldn't just hurt him. You would have ended him. Izuku looked at the ground. Yes, that fear, Aizawa said, pushing off the wall. Keep it. Don't ever lose it. The moment you stop fearing your own hands is the moment you become a villain. He reached into his pocket and tossed something to Izuku. It was a small bottle of high-grade painkillers. For the migraine, Aizawa muttered. You overstressed your frontal cortex creating that cannon. Don't make it a habit. Aizawa walked away, his scarf trailing behind him in the twilight. I'm watching you, Midoriya, he called back. Don't make me regret passing you. Izuku clutched the bottle of pills. He watched his teacher leave. I won't, Izuku whispered. He looked up at the sky. The first stars were appearing. The world was still a chaotic mess of atoms and danger. He was still a loaded gun. But for today, he hadn't fired. For today, he was a hero student. He put the pills in his pocket and walked home, his gloves white and clean in the fading light. The hero costume is not just clothing. It is a declaration of intent. It tells the world what kind of savior you intend to be. For All Might, the costume was a banner, bright colors, a cape that caught the wind, a symbol of unshakable hope. For Bakugo Katsuki, it was a weapon, grenadier bracers, steel-toed boots, an aesthetic of explosive violence. For Izuku Midoriya, standing in the staging tunnel of Ground Beta, his costume was a hazmat suit. It was a sleek, utilitarian design. The bodysuit was a dark, reinforced teal fabric, resistant to tears and abrasions. Over it, he wore a white, heavy-duty trench coat made of a Kevlanomics weave, the tails of which were weighted to prevent them from flapping into his hands during reconstruction. He wore a utility belt filled with vials of raw materials, sand, iron filings, carbon blocks, ammunition for a quirk that required matter to function. But the most striking features were the mask and the gloves. The mask was a modified respirator, covering his mouth and nose, filtering out the dust and silica particles that inevitably filled the air when he deconstructed concrete. It gave him a cold, insectoid appearance, hiding his expressions. The gloves were his lifeline. They were white, extending to his elbows, woven with conductive silver filaments to channel his bioelectricity. They were the only thing standing between his skin and the accidental annihilation of everything he touched. Midoriya, you look intense, Uraraka said. She stood beside him in her pink and black suit. She looked like a hero. Izuku felt like a cleanup crew. It's for safety, Izuku said, his voice slightly muffled by the mask. He adjusted the straps. If I create a cloud of asbestos while breaking a wall, I can't afford to inhale it, and the coat protects me from debris. It looks cool. Uraraka chirped, trying to lift the mood. Like a science doctor hero, the alchemist, Izuku murmured. It was the name he had scribbled on his registration form. It felt fitting. Alchemists sought to change the nature of matter. They sought perfection. Hero Team A. All Might's voice crackled over the comms. Villain Team D. You are cleared to enter the building. The trial begins in 5 minutes. Izuku looked up at the looming concrete structure. Inside, somewhere on the 5th floor, was a papier-mâché nuclear weapon, and guarding it was Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku felt a familiar coldness settle in his stomach. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the heavy, sinking sensation of inevitability. Uraraka-san, Izuku said, turning to her. We need a plan. Right. She pumped a fist. I can float things, and you can, well, do everything else. What's the strategy? Izuku pulled a blueprint of the building from his pocket. He had memorized it in 10 seconds during the briefing, but he needed to show her. Katsuki. Bakugo. He won't care about the bomb, Izuku said quietly. He's coming for me. He has a complex about my quirk. He thinks I'm looking down on him because I don't use it to fight him. But you did use it in the ball throw, Uraraka pointed out. I used it on the ball, Izuku corrected. Never on him. To him, that's an insult. He wants me to fight him seriously. And if I fight him seriously, Izuku looked at his gloved hand. I might take an arm off. Uraraka swallowed hard. The casual way he said it, not as a threat, but as a medical probability, was chilling. So, Izuku continued, pointing to the blueprint. He'll abandon the objective to hunt me. That leaves Ida guarding the weapon alone. I'll draw Bakugo's fire. I'll keep him occupied on the lower floors. You use your zero gravity to float up the ventilation shaft or the windows and secure the weapon. Leave you alone with him? Uraraka looked worried. He looked like he wanted to murder you. I can handle him, Izuku said. I just have to keep rewriting the battlefield. Beep. Start. The infiltration. They entered through a first-floor window. Izuku touched the glass, melting it into a liquid pool that dripped harmlessly onto the floor, allowing them to step through without a sound. The hallway was dark, smelling of dust and old cement. Quietly, Izuku whispered. They moved toward the stairs. Izuku kept one hand hovering near the wall, ready to pull a shield from the concrete at a millisecond's notice. They reached the second-floor landing. Silence. Then a smell. Burnt sugar. Duck! Izuku screamed. He didn't wait for Uraraka to react. He slammed his hand onto the floor. Terrain spike, shield. The floorboards erupted upward, curling into a thick barrier of wood and linoleum just as a blinding flash illuminated the hallway. Boom! The explosion slammed into Izuku's makeshift wall. The wood shattered, splinters flying everywhere, but the blast wave was deflected. Smoke filled the corridor. Checkmate, Deku! Bakugo came flying through the smoke, propelled by explosions from his palms. He vaulted over the remnants of Izuku's shield, his face twisted in a grin of pure predatory delight. He swung his right arm, aiming a hook directly at Izuku's head. Izuku didn't block. He couldn't block. If he blocked, his skin might touch Bakugo's. Izuku dropped to his knees, sliding under the punch. As he slid, he touched the floor with his left hand. Grease trap. He didn't overhaul the floor's shape. He overhauled its friction coefficient. He realigned the polymers in the linoleum to make them perfectly smooth, effectively zero friction. Bakugo landed, ready to pivot and strike again, but his boots found no purchase. He slipped violently, his legs flying out from under him. He crashed onto his back, the wind knocked out of him. Go, Uraraka! Izuku yelled. Uraraka didn't hesitate. She touched herself, became weightless, and kicked off the wall, soaring past the flailing Bakugo and up the stairs. Get back here, round face! Bakugo roared. He fired an explosion into the floor to right himself, flipping back to his feet. He turned to chase her, but a wall of concrete suddenly slammed shut across the stairwell. Izuku stood there, his hand pressed against the adjacent wall. He had pulled the masonry from the side to seal the exit. Your opponent is me, Kaken, Izuku said. His voice was steady, filtered through the mask, sounding robotic. Bakugo turned slowly. Small explosions popped in his palms, lighting up the dim hallway. You stopped running, Bakugo said, his voice low and dangerous. Finally, I can't run anymore, Izuku replied. You won't let me. You think you're better than me, Bakugo spat, stepping forward. You think because you can turn a robot into scrap with one touch, you're a god? You're just a pebble with a flashy trick. I'm going to crush you until there's nothing left to put back together. Bakugo launched himself. The observation room. Class 1A watched the monitors in silence. All Might gripped the podium, his knuckles white. Bakugo is angry, Kirishima noted. Like really angry. Midoriya's quirk is a bad matchup for close combat, Tokoyami observed. If he touches Bakugo, he wins instantly. But Bakugo has range and mobility. It's psychological, Yaoyorozu said, her eyes narrowed. Look at Midoriya's posture. He's not in a fighting stance. He's in a defensive stance. He's terrified of making contact. Terrified of getting hit? Kaminari asked. No, Yaoyorozu whispered. Terrified of hitting. The duel. Bakugo was a whirlwind of violence. He moved with instinctive genius, using explosions to change his trajectory in midair, feinting left, striking right. Right hook. Explosion. Izuku dodged, ducking under the blast. The heat singed his coat. Left kick. Izuku stepped back. He was analyzing. Bakugo's sweat volume is increasing. Explosion yield is up 15%. Structural damage to the hallway is critical. Fight back! Bakugo screamed, firing a blast point blank at Izuku's chest. Izuku slapped his hands together, then thrust them outward. Air cannon, repulse. He disassembled the air molecules between them, creating a localized high-pressure zone that detonated outward. It met Bakugo's explosion in the middle. Wham! The shockwave threw them both backward. Izuku slammed into a wall. Bakugo skidded to a halt, digging his fingers into the floor. Stop using cheap tricks! Bakugo yelled. Use your hands! Come at me and rot my face off, you coward! Izuku wheezed, sliding down the wall. I don't want to kill you, Kaken. That's exactly what pisses me off. Bakugo roared. You think I'm so weak that you have to hold back? You think I'll break if you touch me? Bakugo raised his right arm. He reached for the pin on his grenade-shaped gauntlet. Izuku's eyes widened behind his mask. He knew what that was. He had seen the design specs in his notebook. It was a storage tank. Young Bakugo, stop! All Might's voice boomed over the speakers. Are you trying to kill him? Use of that stored charge indoors is forbidden. He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo screamed, his eyes manic. And he won't dodge if he's trying to be a hero. He pulled the pin. Click. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku saw the ignition spark. He saw the reservoir of nitroglycerin light up. A blast capable of leveling the entire floor was about to be released in a 3-meter-wide hallway. If he dodged, the blast would travel down the hall, blow out the stairwell seal, and potentially hit Uraraka on the floor above. Or it would compromise the building's load-bearing pillars, bringing the whole structure down on top of them. I can't dodge. Izuku stood up. He ripped off his right glove. He threw it aside. Calculation. High-velocity chemical combustion. Rapid expansion of gas. Thermal radiation approximate 2000 degrees Celsius. He needed to neutralize the reaction, not block it. A wall would just become shrapnel. He needed to overhaul the explosion itself. Izuku ran forward. You idiot! Bakugo shouted, watching Deku run into the line of fire. The blast erupted. A wave of fire and force, orange and white, screaming down the hallway. Izuku screamed. He thrust his bare right hand directly into the center of the inferno. Molecular dissipation, vacuum lock. It was agony. The heat blistered his skin before he could even activate the quirk. But then, the connection was made. Izuku's mind engaged with the fire. Fire is a chemical reaction. It needs fuel, heat, and oxygen. Remove the oxygen. Izuku pushed his will into the air filling the hallway. He seized the oxygen atoms feeding the blast and violently ripped them away, fusing them into ozone and sending them upward. Simultaneously, he touched the concrete walls with his left hand, still gloved, and pulled them inward, creating a spherical dome around the blast point to contain the concussive force. The hallway went silent. The giant fireball didn't hit Izuku. It was strangled. Deprived of oxygen, the fire winked out instantly, leaving only superheated gas and smoke. The force of the explosion, having nowhere to go, was absorbed by the concrete dome Izuku had flashed into existence. Izuku stood in the center of the hallway, smoke pouring from his right arm. The sleeve of his coat was burned away. His arm was red, the skin angry and blistered from the second-degree burns he sustained in the fraction of a second before the quirk took hold. He panted heavily, his breath rattling in his mask. The concrete dome crumbled into dust, revealing Bakugo standing on the other side, looking stunned. Bakugo's gauntlet was smoking. He had fired his ultimate move. And Deku had eaten it. He had just deleted it. You! Bakugo whispered. You stopped it? Izuku looked up. His eyes were watering from the pain in his arm, but his gaze was steely. I told you, Izuku rasped. I'm not fighting you. I'm saving you from being a murderer. Something in Bakugo snapped. The shame. The humiliation. The realization that even his strongest attack was nothing to this monster. Shut up. Bakugo propelled himself forward, abandoning quirks, abandoning strategy. He just wanted to hit him. He swung his other gauntlet, the left one, aiming to smash Izuku's face in with the heavy metal. Izuku was tired. His arm was burning. His head was pounding from the massive calculation he had just performed. He didn't have the energy to build a wall. He didn't have the energy to dodge. Reflex took over. As Bakugo's left fist came flying in, Izuku's bare right hand, the hand he had used to stop the fire, snapped up. He didn't aim for Bakugo's face. He aimed for the threat. The heavy metal object coming at him. His fingers brushed the green metal of the grenadier gauntlet. Disassemble. Zzz crack. There was no explosion. No heat. Just a sound like a zipper being pulled down the fabric of reality. Bakugo felt the weight on his left arm vanish. He stumbled forward, his punch carrying no momentum. He looked at his left arm. The gauntlet was gone. In its place, a cloud of fine, metallic dust shimmered in the air, slowly drifting to the floor. The metal, the leather straps, the explosive storage mechanism, all of it had been reduced to its atomic components in a nanosecond. Bakugo froze. He felt a gentle breeze on his skin. The dust was settling on his bare forearm. He looked at Izuku. Izuku was standing there, his bare hand hovering in the space where Bakugo's arm had been. His fingers were mere inches from Bakugo's skin. If Izuku had missed, if he had touched the skin instead of the gauntlet, Bakugo's arm wouldn't be dusty. It would be gone. The realization hit Bakugo like a freight train. He went pale. His breathing hitched. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo felt true, mortal terror. He wasn't fighting an opponent. He was fighting a walking guillotine. Izuku slowly lowered his hand. He looked at the dust on the floor. He looked at Bakugo's terrified face. Izuku's voice cracked. He sounded horrified. I aimed for the metal. I promise. I aimed for the metal. Bakugo took a step back. Then another. He was shaking. You! Bakugo whispered. You almost. Comms check. Uraraka's voice burst through the earpiece, oblivious to the near-death experience below. Deku! I got the weapon! I floated the pillars Ida was standing on and grabbed it. We win! Hero team wins! All Might shouted. The siren wailed. The battle was over, but in the hallway, nobody moved. Izuku stood amidst the wreckage of the floor, nursing his burned arm. Bakugo stood staring at his own bare left arm, unable to stop shaking. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered. Bakugo didn't answer. He couldn't. The critique. The monitoring room was dead silent when the students returned. Usually, there would be chatter. Awesome fight. Cool moves. Not today. Izuku walked in, his arm bandaged. He had applied a quick field dressing from his belt. He walked with his head down. Bakugo walked in behind him, looking like a ghost. He was uncharacteristically quiet. All Might stood at the front. Even he looked shaken. He had almost stopped the match. He should have stopped the match. Well, All Might coughed. An intense battle. Who can tell me who the MVP was? Yaoyorozu raised her hand. Her movement was slow, hesitant. Yes, young Yaoyorozu, I believe. She paused, looking at Izuku, then at Bakugo. I believe the MVP was Ida. Oh? All Might blinked. Explain. Bakugo completely abandoned the objective due to a personal grudge, she began, her voice gaining strength. He launched a lethal attack indoors that could have compromised the building's structural integrity. It was reckless and unheroic. She turned to Izuku and Midoriya. Izuku flinched. Midoriya technically won, she said softly. But his actions were terrifyingly risky. He intercepted a massive explosion with his own body. And his final counterattack. She pointed to the screen, which was paused on the moment Izuku disintegrated the gauntlet. If he had miscalculated by a centimeter, Yaoyorozu said, the room going cold, he would have permanently maimed or killed a fellow student. The level of force he possesses. It's too dangerous for a sparring match. Ida, she concluded, was the only one who acted in character, defended the weapon, and didn't attempt manslaughter. All Might nodded gravely. A fair assessment. Although, I must give credit to young Midoriya for his quick thinking in neutralizing the explosion. Without that dome, the damage would have been catastrophic. He looked at Izuku. Midoriya, my boy. How is your arm? Second-degree burns, Izuku muttered. I can fix it later. I just need some protein and calcium to accelerate the tissue reconstruction. Fix it, yourself? Kirishima asked, eyes wide. I can overhaul my own body, Izuku explained simply. It hurts though. Fixing nerves is unpleasant. The class shuddered. All Might dismissed them to change. The locker room. The silence returned. Bakugo sat on the bench, staring at his left hand. He flexed his fingers. They were still there. Hey Bakugo, Kirishima said gently. You okay, man? That was a crazy fight. Bakugo didn't snap at him. He didn't yell. He held back, Bakugo whispered. Huh! He held back, Bakugo repeated, his voice rising, cracking with emotion. He could have ended it in the first second. He could have turned the floor into spikes and impaled me. He could have touched my face. He stood up, slamming his locker shut. He treated me like glass. Bakugo shouted, tears pricking his eyes. He was so scared of breaking me that he let me beat on him. I'm not weak. I'm not fragile. He stormed out of the room, leaving the class bewildered. Izuku sat in the corner, struggling to button his shirt with his bandaged hand. Here, Todoroki Shoto said. Izuku looked up. The dual-haired boy was standing there. He buttoned Izuku's cuff for him. Thanks, Izuku whispered. Your quirk, Todoroki said, his voice monotone. It destroys bonds. Yes, but you seem obsessed with not breaking them. Izuku looked at the door Bakugo had just slammed. Some bonds, Izuku said sadly, are already broken. I'm just trying not to turn them into dust. The nurse's office. An hour later, Izuku sat on the bed. Recovery girl was unwrapping his arm. Nasty burn, she tooted. And you say you want to fix it yourself? I can do it, Izuku said. I just need the raw materials. If I use your quirk, it drains my stamina. If I use mine, I just need biomass. Fine, she sighed, handing him a protein shake and a calcium supplement. But be careful. Self-modification is a slippery slope. You forget what normal feels like. Izuku drank the shake. He focused on his arm. Dead skin? Damaged dermis? Inflamed tissue? He placed his left hand over the burn. Overhaul. Red light bathed the room. The skin rippled. The blisters vanished. The red, angry flesh knit itself back together, turning into smooth, unblemished skin. It was miraculous. It was instantaneous. But as the light faded, Izuku felt a sharp stab of loneliness. He had fixed his arm. But he couldn't fix the look of terror in Bakugo's eyes. He couldn't fix the way the class looked at him, like a bomb that could go off at any moment. All Might said I could be a hero, Izuku whispered to the empty room. He looked at his hand, clean and perfect. But maybe, he thought, some heroes are just monsters on a leash.